Hello and welcome to Byjus Exam Prep IAS. I welcome you all to the Hindu newspaper analysis for today. Before we dive deep into the Hindu newspaper, I hope all of you are now a part of our Telegram channel. If you have still not joined the channel for any reason whatsoever, make sure that you click on the link given in the description of the video to get all the latest current affairs updates from our Telegram channel about the UPSC examination. Now let's start with the first article from the Hindu newspaper today of importance, that is about the role of the women livestock farmers. Now the reason why this article has been written is not because something new has happened all of a sudden. This is because 15th of October, that is today, is observed as the International Day of Rural Women. And that is why their role, especially their role as a livestock farmer, is now being appreciated and is now being detailed in this article. The authors here are saying that livestock farming in India has been extremely successful in contributing a considerable amount of proportion in our GDP and also the income in the rural areas especially. Livestock sector accounts for 5% of the national income and 28% of the agricultural GDP in 2018-19. Now, livestock farming, for example, can be rearing of eggs, milk products. Those are the kind of things that come into livestock farming. Now, livestock farming also is important because, as you understand, it is not really that dependent on the weather changes. For example, the farmers who are actually growing crops of certain kind that depend on the weather, if there is an unseasonal rainfall or there is a lack of monsoon, lack of irrigation, they might have to see a very negative impact of climatic patterns in the long run. However, in terms of livestock farmers, the climate does not play such a major role as it does in comparison with the other farmers. That is why livestock farming has to be appreciated and has to be encouraged by the government as much as possible. This is why the authors are saying in the last 6 years or so, if you see, the contribution of women also has been immense in increasing the livestock farming activities in the rural areas in the country. In the last 6 years, the livestock sector has grown by close to 8%, while the crop farming has only grown by 2%. So you can see in which of these two sectors there is a lot of growth potential. Now, also a word of caution here, I would just like to clarify, don't compare this 2% with 8% because again, this percentage point is dependent on the base. So because the base of crop farming is much higher, their 2% is not very low as compared to 8%. Because in terms of livestock sector, their base is smaller, that is the economic base, so the percentage of growth will obviously be higher. So do understand that difference as well. Now the authors are saying that women in the rural areas are playing an extremely important role in agricultural activities, including the livestock sector. As per certain estimates of the government, 54 lakh women members are engaged in dairy cooperatives in 2020-21. Now the problem here is that most of the employment surveys, the labor force surveys that are carried out across the country, although they do keep a record of livestock farmers, but mostly their records are not gender specific, meaning that it is difficult actually to get an idea of how many hours are the women putting in terms of livestock farming, how are they taking care of the household also along with fulfilling their duties as a livestock farmer. They say that even though the surveys try to include the point of view of women, but the problem is that the nature of the work done by women is so sporadic, meaning that it's not that they go to a factory, spend 8 hours and then come home and then they're free of it. No. They live in the household, they actually combine the work of their household along with taking care of the livestock. So their time actually gets divided in such a way that it's all intermingled between household and agricultural activities. So a woman, for example, might spend 15 minutes inside the household, then might go outside for 1 hour for work, then again come back and do something in the household itself. So it's more of a 24/7 engagement for the women. That is why it is difficult to actually put a mark on how many hours or how many days they are putting it. So their nature of work is very sporadic. And even when the surveys tried to ask women, how many hours do you put in? What is the nature of your work? Their answers have not been very concrete. The authors here are saying the suggestion is that in the future, whenever these kind of surveys are conducted, to have a good estimate of the women contribution in these kind of activities, we should also include the domestic duty of the women as a job that the women are doing, because that also is just a kind of unpaid labor. As per the government estimates, about 5 lakh women are engaged in animal rearing. The National Livestock Policy of the Government of India has aimed at increasing the production of the livestock and also empowering women. However, there are some shortfalls in those programs as well. The National Livestock Mission, as the article says, wants to empower the women and also ensure that there is much better flow of credit, that is, the loans are available much freely to the livestock farmers. However, the problem is that this scheme does say that they want to empower the women, but they don't have any women specific benefits. For example, they don't say that if a women livestock farmer is taking a loan, at that will be given at a much lower rate of interest. There's nothing like that. So there's no women center or women specific initiative that has been taken. Also, under this mission, 30% of the funds have to come from the states from their kitty of centrally sponsored schemes for women. There are certain problems in this area, as have been pointed out in this article. First, women farmers have not been at the center of attention of the policymakers. That is why we saw even in this National Livestock Mission, there is no women specific subsection. Secondly, 80,000 livestock farmers are trained across the country, but we have no idea about the number of women livestock farmers. So these kind of surveys, these kind of numbers that are released by the government should be gender specific as per the author. Thirdly, women specifically, if they try to start an initiative that they want to be livestock farmers, it is very difficult for them, for single women alone, to go to the banks and get a loan. There is no women specific info even on the Kisan credit cards. The government does say Kisan credit cards has reached a lot of farmers in the country, but there is no data on how many female farmers has it actually reached. Not just this, there is lack of awareness amongst the women about the rights that they have, about the functioning of the dairy board, and how exactly can they actually take advantage of all these things. Thus, the National Livestock Mission is playing a good role, but when it comes to a women specific approach, there is still a lot of things that are missing here. Now, the National Livestock Mission that is mentioned here, I just wanted to give you a few details about that. This mission actually has 4 submissions. Apart from the mission on livestock development, the mission also focuses on pig development in the northeast region, where it is a commodity that is sold in large numbers. Then there's mission on feed and fodder development, and mission on skill development, technology transfer, and extension. This is a mission that was launched in 2014-15, and the government of India since then has introduced a lot of schemes under this particular mission as well. Here are a few details about all these submissions. As I said, submission on breed development of livestock and poultry. This includes a focus on pig for the northeast areas as well. Then we have the submission on feed and fodder development and on research development as well. The animal husbandry numbers in India do look very, very promising as compared to other nations. In fact, livelihood of 55% of rural population somewhere directly or indirectly is supported by animal husbandry. The Economic Survey of 2021 itself said that the contribution of livestock in total agriculture in India as per the gross value addition was close to 25% in 2014 and has now gone above 28%. India has the highest number of livestock in the entire world as per the 20th livestock census. That is why India has a great potential of exploring this as an occupation in a much larger scale. The next article that we have here is about something called the deep tech. The authors are saying that it is time for the government to focus on the deep tech, but it requires a lot of investment. And for that, the government must think of something like a India Strategic Fund. Now, what exactly is deep tech? See, there is no one definition of deep tech, but it is usually defined as a groundbreaking technology that requires a lot of research and that can have an impact on people's life throughout the entire world. For example, think of when Google search came up. Think of when something like the GPS came into the picture, how it has changed the lives of each and everyone living across the entire world. Think of when mobiles were invented. Think of when internet first came into being. Think of satellite communication or AI or blockchain. These kind of technologies that have an impact on the population of the entire world through a lot of research, this is called deep tech. The authors here are saying that this kind of tech in order to develop that, it requires a huge amount of money, because you are never sure how successful would you be in the first attempt. There are a lot of failures involved at each and every step. There are a lot of people whose minds are involved and you have to pay them. It requires a lot of years to actually come up with this kind of technology. That is why the governments should focus on this. The government must also take help from the private sector as well in order to develop something called the India Strategic Fund. The authors say that there are two very good ideas to go forward. One, the government can make better use of the CSR budget. CSR, as you know, stands for Corporate Social Responsibility, the money that the corporates mandatorily have to spend on their social initiatives. The government can actually make better use of this money because a lot of this gets unutilized. Also, the high net worth individuals, they can also be offered tax incentives if they try to invest money in deep tech. Now, why is it that the authors say that India is not really at par with the world? The authors say that right now, if you look around the world, there are four main types of technology. There are semiconductors, there is 5G, there are different revolutions in biology and autonomy. The problem here is that if you actually see, India is not really a leader in any of these. Yes, we have a huge number of startups coming up in India every week, every month. But the fact is that very few of them are really focused on deep tech, on high end tech that is not seen around the world. Mainly, we have startups that are just exploring day to day ideas, be it 10 minutes delivery, be it fintech, be it edtech, but there is nothing that actually is revolutionary that can impact the entire world. Think of biotechnology, think of some new kind of gene, think of AI, think of GPS, which has impacted the entire world. This is what, as per the authors, the Indian startups are still not focusing on. Now, the problem is not in the mind, the problem is with the funding. In countries such as US, Israel, European nations, government is still the largest source of funding for deep tech. Because the problem with deep tech is, in order to develop such an idea, you have to wait for many years before the idea actually turns into a reality. In the initial stage, for many years, you just have to keep on putting in more and more money and wait for the results to actually come up. Now, the private banks and the venture capitalists who actually want to support the startups, they also don't want to support those startups that will give them results after many years. Everyone wants good returns in smaller amount of time, and that is why the deep tech companies have still not been able to get the kind of support that they require. Most of the venture capitalists want to exit those investment in about 10-year period, but that is not enough for the deep tech startup, and that is why India is not really seeing deep tech startups emerge in the country. Now, as I said, there is no proper definition of what is a deep tech startup, but it is usually defined as a research based disruptive innovation that can impact large number of people throughout the world. For example, they can be recycling sewage to get clean water at an affordable cost, because still there are a lot of places in the world where clean water is a very rare thing, in Africa, sub-Saharan Africa, Asia also. Then it can also be a low cost solution for curing blindness, creating alternative to lithium ion batteries at a very large scale, treating diseases which are still uncurable like cancer, diabetes, etc., low cost satellite launch. All these can be examples. There are some examples that have been materialized, like Internet of Things, augmented reality, the metaverse, robotics. All these have now converted into reality, which 20-30 years back were just some ideas that people were working on. This is why deep tech is extremely important. Now, there are also certain reports that say that it is not that there are no deep tech startups in India. There are a few, but they are still on the working stage. For example, there are a few deep tech startups in India that are working on blockchain, Internet of Things, etc. It is not that all the companies in India are just focusing on IT and run of the mill programs. They're also focusing on artificial intelligence, big data analysis, blockchain, etc. But again, as we discussed, since these ideas take a lot of years to turn into reality, we'll have to see how many of them actually do something worthwhile. The next article that we have here is about the unfortunate incident that happened in Gambia. As you know, in Gambia, 66 children unfortunately lost their lives because of consuming a medical syrup that was produced by an Indian pharmaceutical company, the Haryana based Maiden Pharmaceuticals Limited. Now, since then, there have been questions about the authenticity of the Indian pharmaceutical sector. Also, what rules have been in place in India to give permission to such companies to export their products. Now, as you know, in India, we have authorities in place that keep a check on the quality of medicines and the licenses. We have the CDSCO, the Central Drug Standard Control Organization, that has the power to give licenses for exporting of medicines from India. But after this fiasco, CDSCO has banned the company from manufacturing any medicinal drugs. Now, since it's an international matter, WHO also has got involved. The Indian government, in fact, is waiting for a report from the WHO. But in the time being, there is still a lot of questions that are unanswered. Questions such as, this is not the first time that this particular company has come into question of such kind of instances. Within India also there have been multiple instances of this company's medicines actually not being good and leading to a lot of very negative impact on the people. For example, in 2020, a cough syrup made by Himachal Pradesh Digital Vision killed 13 people in J&K and Himachal Pradesh. This particular product that was consumed by children in Gambia was found to have diethylene glycol, that is DEG poisoning, because of which the children have lost their lives. Now, India does have strict laws regarding these kind of issues. The Drugs and Cosmetic Acts provides 10 years of imprisonment for this. However, if you look at the past instances of people losing their life because of medical products, hardly anyone has been punished under this. There are always certain loopholes that are found, and the guilty are just not punished. And the fear is that the same might happen this time around. The only difference this time is that now this is an international issue and India's prestige is at stake. As you know, India is very proud to be the pharmacy of the entire world. We produce a large number of generic medicines and also vaccines that are then supplied throughout the entire world. At this point of time, we cannot afford to have a dent in our image, especially in the pharmaceutical sector. That is why it is time for the government to take some strict action. The other thing that has raised eyebrows is that the same medical syrup that was being sold to Gambia was not even allowed to be sold in India. That is why the regulators are now in question, that is the CDSCO and their role. The article here is saying it is time for India to have an independent regulator because the government based regulators just can't be trusted. Now, this is not the only issue in the Indian drug regulation mechanism. Let me share with you all the issues that Indian drug regulation actually faces. Now, for a long time, the Indian government has been asking US and European nations to provide better access to Indian medical products in those markets. But they keep on saying that your products don't match our standards. In fact, last year, Indian drug manufacturers received 20 letters of warning from the US FDA over the quality of their products. Now, the CDSCO, the authority responsible for giving such kind of licenses to export medicines from India, they themselves are not extremely efficient. A report commissioned by Indian Parliamentary Committee found that the CDSCO has shortage of staff, they have infrastructure issues, and they do not even have the capacity to enforce an actual ban on that particular drug manufacturer. The implementation of the law is not proper as we discussed, although there is a punishment of up to 10 years, but it is hardly ever exercised. The number of drug inspectors in India are also extremely low. Ideally, there should be one drug inspector for 50 pharmaceutical manufacturing units and one per 200 retailers, as per the formula given by the Malshekar committee. However, the number of drug inspectors in most of the states in India is very little. For example, in Gujarat, it is almost half of the number that has been prescribed. The Drugs and Cosmetics Act, that is the primary act to set standards for the drug production in India, has also seen to be ineffective. Even though the act says that if a drug is found to be substandard, the remaining stock will be taken out of the market. But by the time that this kind of a decision is taken, all the stock is almost already sold off. That is why these kind of regulations have been extremely ineffective, and something needs to happen because now India's international image is at stake and this unfortunate incident should never have happened. The next article that we have here is the release of the Global Hunger Index that has come out, and this does not bring great news for India. The Global Hunger Index has ranked India at 107th position out of 121 nations, and India has a worse rank than all the countries in South Asia except Afghanistan. So obviously nothing to actually cheer about. The Global Hunger Index does not really measure how hungry the person is. We have discussed this earlier also. For example, if you're locked up in a room and you're only eating rice for 3 months every single day and nothing else, you will not be hungry. You will not die of hunger. But as per this index, you will be considered as hungry. Why? Because you have not been given the kind of nourishment that your body requires. So this index actually measures undernourishment, child stunting, child wasting, and child mortality. So if you are thinking that the government of India is distributing so much free food grain, then why is it that we still have so many people who are hungry in India? That is because it's not about hunger in the stomach, it's not about people being hungry, it's about nutrition and it's about the physical growth. The countries are divided into 5 categories: low, moderate, serious, alarming, extremely alarming, and India this time around has come in the serious category. The best score is 0. 0 signifies no hunger, while the score of 100 is the highest. India's score is 29.1. India has performed very badly in child wasting. Wasting means having lower weight as compared to your height. And also, we have extremely bad numbers when it comes to child stunting. Although we have shown very slight improvement, but still the numbers are very far from satisfactory. On the whole, although India's overall score has increased from 28.2 to 29.1 as compared to 2014-2022, however, there are still a lot of serious concerns about India's overall position. This is the graph for this year's Global Hunger Index. As you can see, India is among those group of nations which is nothing to be proud of. Nations such as Rwanda, Sudan, Zambia, Afghanistan, Congo. India needs to pull up its socks and improve a lot in this index. Now, this was the index of the last year, that is the 2021. This index also did not really have a lot of good news for India. As you can see, in 2021, India was at 101 position. So the rank of India is actually fluctuating in this ballpark figure only. It fluctuates by 4-5 points, but it does not really improve or deteriorate on a very large scale. It's almost the same over the past few years, as you can see here in this graph. Now, as expected, the government of India does not really appreciate or support these kind of reports, especially when they criticize India. Now, this year's report has just come out, so we have not had any reaction from the government. But let me share with you the government's reactions about the last year's 2021 report. So last year when the report came up, the government of India found this report to be unscientific. They said that the methodology that is used by this report is highly against India. As per the government, the report has ignored the fact that the government of India has been running a lot of welfare programs during COVID, like Pradhan Mantri Garib Kalyan Ann Yojana, Atmanirbhar Bharat scheme, that should have improved the level of nutrition in the country, but these indices do not show that. Also, as per the government, these indices are just based on opinion polls, most of the time which are conducted over the telephone. So you are not really conducted a physical assessment, going to the people's house. You are not actually measuring their height or weight. You're just asking on the phone what is the height of your kid, what is the weight of your kid, what is the age, and then you are basing your assumption and the report on that only. So the government of India says that we don't accept that because our numbers are much better than what the report says. These are the important articles in the Hindu newspaper today. Now, a couple of practice questions. Number 1. With the lax standards of drug regulations in place in India, the Gambia medical syrup tragedy was waiting to happen. Comment. Second, despite multiple efforts by the government in the past few years, India's ranking in the Global Hunger Index has remained disappointing. What can be the possible reasons for this? Both the questions have to be answered within 250 words each. Thank you so much for watching the video. Have a good day ahead.